right, welcome back everybody. This is segment 2 of lesson 1 in Speaking 1. And now we're going to continue on remembering that today's topic is personal data. We can now get to the main point and actually start talking about what sort of data that you might be asked to give. So the first thing obviously is your name. Now that sounds pretty simple, but there are actually lots of different pieces to names. So I want to pull this over here as an example, and we're going to look at this together. So most people, at least in the Western countries, have 3 names. So this person's name is Jonathan Michael Smith. Okay, so he's got 3 names, but they all have a little bit different meaning or purpose. Okay, so the first one is usually what we call their first name, not too difficult. The second one, because we have 3, we usually call this the middle name. The last one is called the last name, pretty easy. But sometimes the last name can be called something else. So, just like here where you see family name or surname, right? Family name and surname, those are other ways of saying last name. So, if you see a form and you're asked for your family name or your surname, it would just be the last part, Smith. Okay? But other times, you'll see this. You'll see called name. What is your called name? And what that means is whichever one of those 3 names is what people call you. Okay? So for most people in the United States, the called name is the first name. In this case, it would be Jonathan. But sometimes people are called by their middle name. So if his called name was Michael, then he would write Michael there. If his called name was Jonathan, he would put Jonathan there. Your called name will almost never be your last name. Okay, so just for fun, let's say that his called name is actually his middle name, Michael. So as he's filling out the form, he's going to write his middle name, Michael, because that's what he is called. Okay, but then we also have this phrase here, which is your nickname. Now, I know in Indonesia, a lot of times they get nickname and called name confused, but they actually are a little bit different. The called name, as I explained, is whatever one of your real names that you are called by. But your nickname is a little bit different. Nickname is usually a name that is given to you by your friends and people that you know well, but it's not actually your name. Okay? So in this case, if his called name is Michael, his nickname might be Mike, M-I-K-E. So you see that that's kind of related to his name, but it's not actually part of his real legal name. Okay? So that's the difference. When we talk about your complete or full name or your legal name, it's all 3, Jonathan Michael Smith. If we're talking about your family name or your surname, it's going to only be the end, only be the last name, Smith. Okay? Your called name could be either your first name or your middle name. In this case, his called name is the middle one, Michael, and then the nickname is just Mike. So these are some really important things to know as you're giving personal data, because depending on what you're asked for, you may have to give different ones. Okay, let's move on. So besides names, another thing that you might need to give is your address. Okay, so let's pull over an example address here. All right, this address is 53 Oak Street, Staunton, Alabama, that's in the United States. And then we have this number, 38916. So we want to talk about the different parts of this. So in the United States and in most countries, the number is actually the first thing in the address. I know here in Indonesia, you usually use the name first and then the number. But in Western countries, the number typically goes first, then the name of the street, and then you'll need some sort of abbreviation that tells whether it is a street or a lane or a boulevard. Those are all different ways of saying street. So, for example, you might see ST, which is street, but you might also see HWY, which stands for highway. You could see BLVD, which stands for boulevard, or maybe even LN for lane. So all of these different things basically just mean street. They're just different sizes of street, if you want to think of it that way. We also have AVE, which is avenue. Okay, so number first, then the name of the street, and then some sort of abbreviation that tells what kind of street it is. Then we're going to have the city name. So this is the city, starting, and the province, or in America we call them states, so Alabama. And the last thing, just like here in Indonesia, is the zip code. So this is the zip code. Most places the zip code is 5 digits. Okay, so that is a basic address. However, if you live in some other places, you might have an additional section. After you give the street, you might need an apartment number if you live in an apartment building. So you might use the abbreviation APT for apartment, and then you could say number, we use the pound symbol for the word number, apartment number 3C. Okay, so in that case, they live at 53 Oak Street. 53 Oak Street is the address of the building, but then in the building there are many apartments. So the next thing would be apartment number 3C. Then the city, Starton, the province, Alabama, and the zip code, 38916. Okay, most of the time you're going to need this zip code with the city and province if you're going to be mailing something. So anytime you fill out a form, usually they want your mailing address so that they can send you documents. And that's why we will need to give that to them. Okay, now then, let's talk about the next piece of information, which is phone numbers. Now earlier, we already talked about numbers, so that should make this easier. When you're asked for your phone number, again, there are different pieces. The first part is the country code, and then you'll have what's often called a prefix and your number. In the United States, the country code is +1. The next 3 digits we call the area code. Then this is called the prefix for your local area, and then your regular rest of your number. Okay, so say this number with me. This is plus, and then use the numbers that we talked about earlier today. 1, 9, 2, 7, 5, 5, 5, good. 8, 0, 3, 4. Okay, so we need to talk about this 0 because that's not one of the numbers we mentioned before. You can say the number, the actual name of the number is 0, Z-E-R-O, but oftentimes when we're giving our phone number, it's faster just to say O, just like the name of the letter. Okay, so as you are reading these, whenever you see a 0, you can say 0 or you can just say O. So if I was going to read this number, I'm usually going to read 3 digits or 4 digits at a time. So I read this as +1, 927, 555, 8034, or you could say 8034. All right, so now we've got name, address, telephone. The last piece of information we're going to talk about today is your email. Okay, in this day and age, everyone has email because you need it for all of those apps and accounts that you have, right? Now, the email is made up of a few different things. Again, your regular name. This is what's called the @ symbol. Then usually the company where you got the email from. So it might be Yahoo, it might be Gmail. In this case, this is our company name, Fajar Impian Nusa Bangsa, and then a dot something. Most of the time it's .com. Okay, so these are pretty easy. When we're giving out our email address, if it's made up of words, like in this case, connect, we won't spell it out usually. We just say the word connect, then the symbol @ and then the business, fajarimpianusabangsa.com. The only time we would spell it is if our email address was not a word. So say it was 9B3C@fajarimpianusabangsa.com, because that's not a word. In that case, we would spell it out using the numbers and the letters. Okay? The only other thing you need to know for these is these special symbols that we often use in email. So, just like here in the address above, we had this dot, and we say it like this right here. The word is dot. Okay? If you have a dash, the dash is the one that's in the middle of the line. Okay? But sometimes we have a line, but it's at the bottom, and that's what we call the underscore. So the position of the underscore, notice, is down at the bottom. The position of the dash is in the middle. Okay? Then another symbol that some people will have in their email address is what we call the ampersand. And the ampersand, again, you don't know that word maybe, but you have seen it before. It's just the symbol that we use for and. And then the final one that every email address must have is the @ symbol. And you're used to seeing that. Okay, so if I were to give you an email address, let's try one. Let's say my email address, it's not really my address, but say my email address is eric@connect.com. Okay, so my name, Eric, then the symbol @connect.com. Okay, so that's the basic personal information that you're going to be asked for when you're filling out forms. Personal data of your name, your address, your telephone number, and your email. And hopefully you are ready to give all of those out today. So the last thing that we're going to do before I let you go and do some private work or personal practice is we're going to practice filling out this form. Okay? So we're going to do this together. This is the basic form that you would be filling out, and we're going to do it together. Then on your independent practice, on your worksheet, you're going to use your own information to fill out a form. Okay, so this one, notice it just says name. It doesn't say first name, it doesn't say last name, it just says name. So when that's the case, we're going to give them our full name, or your legal name. So in this case, we're going to use the name Shelly, S-H-E-L-L-Y, Shelly. Ray is her middle name, R-A-E, Jones, J-O-N-E-S. Okay, so that's her full legal name, Shelly Ray Jones. Then it asks for her address. Okay, so her address is 238, and she lives on Baldwin, B-A-L-D-W-I-N. And this is not a street, it's an avenue. So we're going to say Baldwin Avenue, A-V-E. Now what's interesting is that Shelly does not live in the United States. So for the province, or the city first, we're going to say that she lives in Semarang. And that means that her province is Jawa Tengah, or what you usually refer to as Jateng. and then the zip code 50312. Okay, now then, the correct format for this would be to do it as we did above with all of those under each other. So the name of the street and then the city. I just didn't have room for that down here, so I wrote it out to the side. All right, Shelly's phone number, because she lives in Indonesia, her phone number I'm going to say, and I want you to write it down, and then I'll write it after. Plus 62, right? So that's Indonesian's country code. Then the rest of her number is 881 7413 9572. All right, so her number 74139572. All right, so if you notice, Indonesia's phone numbers are much longer than our phone numbers in the US, but every country is a little bit different. But you see the same basic parts are there. We have the country code, and then the prefix in Indonesia. This usually tells you what cell phone carrier you're using, and then the rest of it would be your individual number. The last thing that we need before you do your own practice is Shelly's email address. So I'm going to say it to you, and I want you to write it down. Her email address is Shelly_Jones@connect.com. So here's what it would look like. Shelly _ so that's at the bottom, Jones. Notice that's her first name and her last name. Shelly Jones at connect.com. Pretty easy, right? Okay, so now you've learned how to fill in a basic form, and in the segments that come after this, we're going to start to use this in a little more exciting way in how we can talk to other people about our personal information. Because oftentimes you'll just fill in the form just like we did. It'll just be a piece of paper. But there are other times when someone will be asking you for the information and you need to be able to answer their questions. So press pause on the video and you can go ahead and do the written practice for segment 2.